Oh, so today we're talking about literature and Utopia. Brought my friend with me. Hopefully he'll stay on my arm. We'll see. I'll explain all this in a moment, but this is the time period in American history when writing flourishes and everyone has their spectacles and they're reading, okay? So we're going to talk about how did Thoreau's ideals model Romanticism? What do transcendentalists believe? And what's the goal of utopian societies? Okay, so we're going to start with the literary Renaissance. So many writers, thinkers of the day are going to adopt Romanticism. The idea of we should have feeling over reason, inner spirituality over all these rules in society. And the individual is more important than the society or the government. And also nature over man-made. I will say that I think this is one part of Romanticism that we in the most recent times have gotten wrong. Where, you know, we're always behind a computer and we're never really outside anymore. So they would totally disagree with society as we have it today. So much time is spent sitting at a computer instead of being outside. Okay, New England writers. So remember when we did the colonies, these are folks that are going to be in, Vermont, Massachusetts areas, and philosophers begin this Romanticism movement, and it becomes known as transcendentalism. To transcend means to overcome. So it urged people to overcome the limits of their minds and embrace the beauty of the universe. So really thinking outside the box, going back to no more external rules like you must do this and you must do this and you must do that. More about your own rules and embracing life to the fullest. I have a picture of that, which I think will help explain transcendentalism to you. And here it is. And it says, reliance on the self and the search for spiritual truths. And see, this dude's standing out kind of in the wilderness. So definitely being outside, searching for yourself, getting back to nature, that kind of thing. Okay, so we have a few American writers who are going to embrace this and really model it. I'm going to start with Ralph Waldo Emerson. He is probably the most influential. In 1836, he writes the essay Nature. And he says, if you want fulfillment, you should work for communion with the natural world. Take care of the natural world and be out in it. Nature. So that was very important to him. Most influential transcendentalist. Here is a picture of him and a quote which I liked, so I picked it. So there he is, Emerson, and it says, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. So to be your own person in the midst of a world where everyone's trying to be the same. It's a lot like today, is it not? It's a lot like high school, actually. So he's saying, be yourself. Don't try to be someone else, someone you're not. In this society, there was a lot of, we must do this, 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 this. And, they're rejecting that. Okay. The other guy is Henry David Thoreau. And he said we should use self-reliance, reliance on ourselves, not on government, not on church, not on other individuals. Fight this pressure to conform, meaning fight the pressure to be like everyone else or to do whatever society dictates. He's going to write a famous book named Walden. He actually built a cabin out in the woods. I'll show you the cabin first. At a pond named Walden Pond. So here's the cabin. And he lived in this cabin for more than a year. Totally self-reliant, by himself, writing and living in nature. Here is a picture of Thoreau. He's also going to push civil disobedience. The idea that will be picked up by Gandhi, which will be picked up by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this idea is that if the law is not appropriate or discriminatory, you do have an obligation to break that law. So there's like a higher thinking there that the law is wrong. And, for example, of course, with African Americans in the 60s, which will come more than 100 years after this, they will use the idea of civil disobedience, that the law said that, for example, African Americans could not sit at a lunch counter and eat. So they will sit there to prove that the law was wrong. Okay, that's civil disobedience. Okay, they don't fight or anything like that. That would not be civil. Okay, so that's the right. Then we have James Fenimore Cooper, who will romanticize Native Americans and frontier explorers and go back to the idea of, remember when we killed off all the Indians, how wrong we were. He will write the book The Last of the Mohicans. It's also a movie, but it's really old. Here is sort of the poster from that. Well, actually, I think this is like a CD picture, but anyway, it was a movie, Last of the Mohicans, and pretty good movie, actually, based on the book. Okay, Last of the Mohicans. So it's talking about Native Americans and how we kill them off and mistreat them, which we will continue to do into the next course, The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. Okay? All right, and then we have Nathaniel Hawthorne and the Scarlet Letter, which I brought with me. Scarlet Letter. So Nathaniel Hawthorne will write the book Scarlet Letter. I don't know if you've read it in English. It was probably the hardest book I had to read in high school, I thought, because it's all Puritan language. It's in a Puritan setting, which you've studied the Puritans. Remember when we talked about John Winthrop, and they're sitting on a hill, and all your money went to the church. You paid your taxes to the church. If you didn't attend church, you got kicked out of the church and of the community, not just of the church. He's going to basically explore persecution and psychological suffering that results from sin. So Hester Prynne is the main character, and she has an illicit affair with a gentleman whom I will not name in case you have to read the book. But anyway, she has an illegitimate child. So while she is pregnant and not married, the Puritans make her wear a big, huge scarlet A. See, my A is red. Scarlet A on her chest. So she has to walk around town pregnant with this scarlet A. It was actually like a homecoming queen ribbon across her, and she wore this big A on her. And it had to be pinned to her all the time because she was an adulteress. Okay. So that shows, her sin. She literally wore her sin, both through the pregnancy and the Scarlet Letter A. Okay. Very difficult book to read. Then we have Edgar Allan Poe, poet, short story writer. I'm sure you've read Poe in some of your English classes. He's a little nuts, okay? A little out there. He married his cousin. Then she died, and he sort of spiraled out of control. He is originally from Baltimore, and therefore the Baltimore football team is called the Baltimore Ravens. That's a pretty cool analogy there I just gave you. So a couple of pictures of him. First, I want to show you this picture I found on the internet, which I thought was hilarious. Since I'm talking about the raven, here is a raven behind him. I brought my raven, but he's a little bit more like a, I don't know what he is. This is the closest thing I had to a raven in my house. So here's my raven. On my shoulder, just like Poe has his raven on his shoulder. Poe's a little crazy. Okay, and he writes Telltale Heart, if you've read that. And of course, The Raven, and many, many more. He's really into short story writing. I want to show you some of the text of The Raven. Show you how crazy it is. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, so I was going to sleep, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." And then it goes further down to, "Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, 'Lenore.' This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, 'Lenore.' Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. 'Surely,' said I, 'surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more.' But it goes on to say, it's a raven. And he says here, 'Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou,' I said, 'art sure no craven. Ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on that night's Plutonian shore.' Quoth the raven, 'Nevermore.'" So the raven talks, okay? So it's a little crazy. Anyway, he's out there. All right, so there is Edgar Allan Poe. Then you have Walt Whitman, who will write Leaves of Grass. And he's again focusing on nature, common people, how we need to get back to nature and not get so industrialized and busy inside, but we should be outside. Leaves of Grass. And finally, Emily Dickinson, best remembered female poet of that era. And you can see a lot of her poetry online. I'm sure you may have also read some of her stuff in junior English. Okay, so then we wrap it up with crazier utopian communities, which are new communities that spring up after this optimism about human nature and being self-reliant, doing everything yourself. So some people thought a better way to their life was to separate themselves from society and form their own perfect society. The word utopia means perfection. So this is an ideal society using cooperative living, where everyone would work together on this farm. Everyone would work. Everyone would grow the crops. Okay, so we would all pitch in and work together to grow our own food and to make our own living. Cooperative living, so we would all work together. Brook Farm is probably the most famous. George Ripley created this farm community in Massachusetts in 1841, and I also have a picture of Brook Farm. It shows you sort of why it may not have been a good idea. So, I went too far with that, where you can't really see Brookwood Farm. There can never be a perfect community, of course. Problems will always occur. You're always going to have fighting. A perfect community just does not exist, which is what they're going to figure out. But it was just an experiment to see if we could all live together communally in, perfect society. It honestly, it's like an early hippie village. So, you won't have that tore up the raven. You won't have hippies until the 60s in America too. But here you see kind of an early version of that, where they live off the land and they all live together. There's also a religious group known as the Shakers will establish small utopian communities from Maine north all the way down to Kentucky. Make sure you remember that. Maine to Kentucky. Okay, Shakers, utopian communities that were more religious based. Okay, so again, we got everybody reading, right? And now they're living in these perfect utopian communities. However, those communities won't last very long. All right, let's go back into the essential questions. How did Thoreau's ideals model romanticism? So remember, Thoreau was going to say we should fight the pressure to conform. We shouldn't be like everyone else. And romanticism basically said the individual is more important than the society. You should do what's best for you. Okay, what do transcendentalists believe? They believe